Welcome to the fourth day of the Young Van Eyck Academy Open Studios. It's a wonderful day to be together again and to have another beautiful program for you, online and offline. We also have an audience, as you heard. Tonight we have, first of all, the Writers Program coordinated by Erik Lindner, and none of all, we have Shayna straight from LA, our alumni, Shayna Hun on screen. Super happy that you're here, Shayna. Very happy that you're part of this program tonight. And then we have a panel of speakers of Asha Karami, Frederik Willem Daan, and Inge Schilpeoort. And Erik will moderate some of that. After which we will have a short break of a few minutes, so we can make a different setup. Then we will have the film of Hamza Ahsan, Shy Radical. Super excited about this film. Hamza is here himself, and he will be having a conversation with Tom Dream, the director of the film. This will be introduced by Bruno, the curator of the Jan van Eyck. So one thing, please switch off your phones. It's important for the recording. This will all be recorded, and I wish you a wonderful evening. So first of all, I give the stage to Erik Lindner.
Goedenavond, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, participants, writers, members of the staff. This is our third and last evening. We will have a writers program, and as you can see on stage we have 3 persons and a television. And from left to right it's Inge Schilpeoort, Frederik Willem Daan, Asha Karami and Shayna Hun, who is on screen. They all were participants and writers of our last year's program. I'm very happy to have you here as this evening's program. They all will be reading about 10 minutes from their work in different languages, English and Dutch, and for the people who don't feel like understanding Dutch, who don't understand Dutch, we will try to make some sort of abbreviated summary of what they say. But first of all, we start with a discovery for me. Like every year, I have talks with the participants, so not only the writers, but also the participants. We do studio visits, and I don't get to see all of them, which is also logic. I mean, not every artist wants a poet in the studio, and it's also not obliged. But so some people I get to know, and some people I don't get to know at all, either if they write or if they don't write. But in this case, something special happened. Shayna was here, I think, already a year, belonged to the last group of participants, so not this group, but the year before, and happily was still there, thank you, Corona, when the first lockdown started. So I did this Skype studio visits, online studio visits, and Shayna signed up, sent me her text, shared her file with me, and this was an amazing discovery. And I think anyone who joined the famous writing group at the time also knows that well, apart from being an artist, Shayna really has a voice in literature. So this happens more often during the 8 years that I worked here. And somehow it's for me the exciting part. Of course, I like to work with writers who come here, but the artists who write literary and I work with them, it always feels like well, a sort of extra present for my work. And I was very touched by your text, Shayna. Can you hear me? Or... Yes, okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Now I can hear you too. You're in Los Angeles. You're going to you are going to read for us a story. Would you like to say something about the story before you start? Or
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be sitting, like literally sitting among some of you today. This was the first thing that I have written. I didn't really know what I was writing when I started. A big part of my practice behind the scenes as a visual artist is collecting images. So I thought first that I would write even an academic essay on how I interpret, read, and collect images rather obsessively. And it morphed into something that was quite different that excites me, and something I am pursuing still alongside of my other work, which does involve image collecting, filmmaking, and sculptures.
Okay, okay, great. Would you read us a story? Then I go and sit down and we're going to listen to you. It's Shayna Hohen.
Thank you. This is part of a larger project I'm still working on, but this excerpt I'm entitling Your Arch. Behind the antique weapons store and the Tex-Mex restaurant was All Stars Dance Center. On Tuesdays, my mom dropped me off early on her way to night classes in the community college. It was Tuesday, and like all Tuesdays, I waited inside the studio's lobby for you. Your shadow arrived first, then your silhouette, specifically the shape of a halter dress over bootcut jeans that you'd somehow made work. The dress was of a stretchy jersey material that bunched on the sides, giving your silhouette the shape of what we thought to be true womanhood. A thick, partially plucked unibrow accented your large eyes. You had a broad mouth and a small gap between your teeth. You looked a bit like a French actress, but without the perpetual nervous fatigue. More brash, like Brigitte Bardot, also known as Bibi, my first crush. When I first saw Bibi in the movie and God Created Woman that my parents rented because their bougie friend told them it was good, I didn't know if I wanted to be her or fuck her. The director claimed that Bibi was a phenomenon of nature. She doesn't act, she exists, he said. That's right, Bibi confirmed. When I'm in front of the camera, I'm simply myself. Bibi and her character in the movie Juliet ate what they wanted, danced where they wanted, and screwed who they wanted, where they wanted, with the same simplicity. I admired them. After that, my parents never rented another old movie, and I didn't meet Bibi again until years later when our haircut came back into style, the middle parted tapered bangs. In those earlier years, you became my Bibi. Like her, you were crass, rude even. Some qualities I too tried on from time to time when I felt bold and that it was worth a slap, or sometimes more. We migrated into the dance studio a few minutes after you changed. The impression of your belly ring you got at Claire's 2 weeks prior poked through your black leotard. This was the first time I noticed it in public. We took our places at the bar in first position. Our toes turned out, hips rolled out, butts in, stomachs in, shoulders back, ankles wrapped. Hair so taut that my already 5-finger forehead gained a finger or two. To get into ballet posture, one has to become a marionette. A string was tied to the top of my sternum, lifting my chest at its will. First with just 3 small tugs, then with a slow, hard hoist until my entire body was suspended. Just my big toes kissed the ground. The music started. I began to reach behind me with my left hand on the bar, stretching my chin away from my body. Blood rushed towards my face and made it heavy. It sank as my spine contorted into a deep back cambray, a classical ballet term meaning arched. I saw my long hair gather on the floor behind my heels. Then I saw you. You had an amazing arch. Your left leg pointed behind you at 45 degrees. Your vertebrae folded backwards and extended through your right arm, making a beautiful parallel line with your leg. You sat satisfied as you gazed at your pretzel teen body in the mirror. You extended your arch a bit past good form. You didn't follow the typical conventions of a ballerina, that is, thin, poised, with a consistent vertical alignment. Your body moved away from itself. It could break, shake, and put itself back together like that of a belly dancer. The Middle Eastern dancers the West called grotesque in the 19th century, yet my mom's gym hosted a full class of belly dancing every week after Zumba. You didn't limit your body on stage, and you didn't limit the spectacle of your body to the sanction of a stage. You danced on chairs at the Dairy Queen while you licked your ice cream cone. You twerked in the pews after Sunday school. You wrote with your body. And like my BB, your story was not one of feminine mystery, but it was unpredictable. Your arch was more fierce than the spider crawl in The Exorcist, that infamous scene on the height of the young girl's demonic. Your that infamous scene on the stairs at the height of the young girl's demonic possession. The one not in the original release, because the director didn't like that you could see the strings that suspended the contortionist. She was a marionette too. With some help from CGI, the strings were erased and her backbend was released to the public 27 years later. Your arch was more memorable than the dip in the famous photograph of a US Navy sailor grabbing and kissing a nurse in Times Square in 1945. The unnatural and extreme nature of her arch indicates she is caught off guard by the stranger. My older sister had a wedding announcement on her fridge I initially mistook for this photo. But in a way, it is this photo. In the middle of a large street, my sister's best friend and my former ballet instructor leans into a deep back cambray. Red roses dangle in her right hand as her fiance grabs her waist and leans over her. He encircles her body as they embrace in a kiss. Your arch was more hypnotic than Augustine's hysteria demonstrations at the Salpêtrière Hospital. She perfected her convulsions and arched back for the famous neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot. He openly held demonstrations to the public. Freud, Degas, and actress Sarah Bernhardt, to whom she was often compared, frequently attended. Augustine was able to hold her poses for the long exposure times the camera required, and long enough for the plaster cast to dry, solidifying her contorted gestures in stone. When she refused to be photographed, she was put in solitary confinement. Eventually, she escaped the hospital by dressing as a man, a 19th century keenness of sorts. Maybe it's only with Keanu Reeves in The Matrix that a gravity-defying backbend can be used for combat. Your art was more sublime than the quasi-yoga positions in the fitness magazines, the ones in the back of Books A Million that we saw after dance class that day. Amongst these magazines, there was a much anticipated Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition. It also prominently featured the arch as a medium of extreme euphoria, what freedom is supposed to look like. I marveled at these women and prayed that one day I could be happy like that, or have breasts like that. We continued to sip our caramel macchiatos with extra whipped cream and flip through Cosmo, taking horoscope quizzes and noting fashion ideas. You ripped off the perfume sample sticker from the magazine and rubbed it on your wrists. It was Curious by Britney Spears. You lifted your arm slightly towards me. I only smelled alcohol and your sweat and told you it smelled good. It did. At the checkout, as I purchased a magazine, you smiled at me in a twisted manner. I knew it meant you were about to steal a candy bar below the counter. And because of our age and white skin, you could take them with a smile. Although I despised when you did this, I also hoped, in a way, your performance was for me. You split the stolen Kit Kat bar and offered me half. We walked slowly through the middle of the vast strip mall parking lot into unlit gravel streets. After licking the chocolate off your fingers, you grabbed my hand and swung it energetically in jest. I squeezed your hand with a simple pulse to imply, I like this. I like you. On the route back to your house, we crossed a figure carved into a tree. The life-size carving was in the front yard of a modest brick house. It was a white man with long brown hair wearing a white robe. He had a large moth-like wings extending from his body. The lines of what I'm assuming are supposed to be feathers were painted crudely in a way that made them appear as veins, a gigantic veiny Luna moth man. I call him Treesus. I don't know how old Treesus is because he gets a fresh coat of paint every year, but he has existed for as long as I know. His face is modeled with wood filler to make more pointed nose and realistic eyes. God and I had a good relationship, but I didn't tell him everything. I would have given anything to talk to God about you at the time and my feelings for you, but instead I whispered these things to Teresa's in the front yard of a stranger's home, and I didn't even have the language for him. That night, he lingered in the shadows, partially illuminated by the sole light of the front porch. There were no cars in sight, so no one could see us very well. Therefore, no one could bother us very well, hurt us very well. We were two young girls walking alone, hand in hand, in short Sophie shorts, the kind with riding along the butt, the kind you roll the waistband down 2 or 3 times so a quarter of your ass peeks out beneath the words, all stars. Later at your house, alternating between gossip and silence, we lay in your blood-stained floral sheets as a tangle of limbs and blonde hair. It was 2 a.m. I laid awake holding you as the radio continued to blast Miss Independent and In the Club at full volume. You couldn't sleep without the noise. I didn't know that it would be our last night together, but you would soon buy a wig of every color and hold onto a god and a boyfriend as if your life depended on it. My desire for you would feel cruel, the kind of cruelty I now know is a kind of love. I saw the arch again 3 years later in 2009 when I had just moved away from Texas. It was in some B movie like The Unborn, but it could have been Legion or The Grudge. Many movies of these sorts came out around the time you died. I consumed these horror films with a new kind of devotion. Thank you.
Thank you, Shana. We were almost the letters you were looking at, but I think the text was just a little lower, so we felt like we were the text you were writing, in fact. I'm very happy to have had you on my program and that you were part of this. And I hope you'll continue writing and let us know how it goes. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, for the next, we will have Inge Schilperoort, and I'd like to try to make some lines of these 3 reading evenings we had. We had the put, the hole in the ground of Ignaz Kami. We had the hut, so the put and the hut of Jamal Fouad. We had 2 brothers, Hamia Ashan and his brother. We had 2 sisters, Gerda Blaise and with her letter to her sister. We had a ghost, the negotiation with a ghost that Gerda Blaise made for her sister. We had once the ghost stories collected by Roos van Rijswijk around the campfire that she wrote about in the form that the ghost will tell the story itself. So she made there a literary form. And we had the book, The Garden, The Beast, The Ghost from Nina Polak. So it seems tonight maybe we'll get some sort of theme of the evening. I'm not totally sure because we have 3 quite different characters if I look at the 3 of them. Inge Schilperoort worked, I think, very good in this academy, and it was very much a pleasure to have you here. And both you worked very hard, both you enjoyed the building and made a lot of connections. I hope you will make a book with Ignaz Kami about the put, the hole in the ground, and the clay that started to, not to sing, but to whistle. I thought the notion of singing clay would also be nice. That was once a rumor by Aliki. So I think the books we make with the writers here usually are always come out of these collaborations with participants and writers, or future to be alumni. So I'm looking forward to that. You have debuted with Meithond. We know the book it has already 13 prints now. This is the film edition. We showed the film here, the film by Patrice Toy from Meithond, Tench in English. I found this morning in the tribune this little book Hunger. I always thought you had only one book, but this is another. It's in fact a story from a literary review made into a book. And
More or less, yeah.
I think the buyers can get reduction on the book, so it's something for the youth or so. It's a strange item, I think. And but I know what you will read us. But before that, I want to say that I was very touched personally by. We got some complaints in the talks we had about the viewers that we mentioned too much The Hague, which we're sorry about because The Hague is not in Limburg, of course. But I was very touched that you wrote Tench, thinking of Duindorp, which is a village of The Hague next to Scheveningen. And my big sister, I have one big sister, worked for the Bureau Discriminatiezaak in the 90s, the so-called non-political 90s, and discovered that in this area, which was totally working class but totally white, they made it impossible for colored people to get a house there. So this was a huge scandal. And you, in a way, I think it's still a bit like that, this neighborhood, I think. So there was once an investigation about it, of the Bureau of the City Council. And of course, this does not directly relate to your story, but the story is that people are the last inhabitants of houses which are about to be destroyed. And in this decor, the story takes place. That's I thought that was fascinating to observe. I'm going to give you the stage, Inge. You can read in Dutch.
I can say something in English, but I will.
That's good. And we'll try to help the audience afterwards with translation of what you read. But if you announce it in English, you can read in Dutch. Okay.
Yeah.
Will you hear from that?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, so I've had a really great time here. I was here for 3 months. I worked really hard on my, I call it my second novel. There was, like you say, a small, a small book in between, but a second real novel, big novel. I worked really hard. I finished my first draft, which is not complete enough to read from. So instead, I will read 2 other things that I wrote here, because I write a monthly column for Psychologie magazine, which has to do with my work, because apart from writing, I'm also a forensic psychologist. And yeah, the columns are usually about something having to do with my work and the relationship to myself, etc. So, but it's in Dutch, so sorry for the people who cannot understand it. Goed. Deze eerste heeft nog niet echt een titel, geloof ik. Laatst bezocht ik een congres over literatuur en psychologie. De prikkelende insteek was: wat de literatuur kan, dat de psychologie niet vermag. Niet omdat psychologie een dommere discipline is, maar omdat het een wetenschappelijke en dus objectiverende fundering heeft. Een forensisch psycholoog in de rechtszaal heeft weinig aan louter en lyrische beschrijving van iemands psychische toestand. Toch leren we naar mijn idee het meest over iemands belevingswereld via de literatuur. Als scholier en student had ik de gewoonte om aansprekende citaten uit romans over te schrijven in mijn dagboek. Laatst vond ik er eentje terug, van Jenny Diski. Als je je te lang door de wind laat rondblazen, breekt er een moment aan waarop er niets meer van je over is. Er valt niets terug te halen, zelfs niet als de wind gaat liggen. Ik moest denken aan een vrouwelijke gevangene van begin 30, wie deze 2 zinnen alles samenvatte. Wanneer ik tegenover haar zat, waaiden die woorden soms door mijn hoofd. Zo hard als de wind die door haar leven had geraast en daar kaalslag had aangericht. Zij was een ongewenst kind geweest. Een hinderlijke aanwezigheid in haar moeders leven. Wanneer ze huilde, negeerde haar moeder haar of sloot haar op in een kast, totdat ze stil was. En stil bleef. Later woonde ze bij een oom die 's nachts haar slaapkamer binnendrong. Zij bevroor, wachtte met ingehouden adem tot het over was. Toen haar leven eenmaal wat veiliger werd, was er weinig meer van haar over. Ik heb eigenlijk geen idee wie ik ben, vertelde ze. Ze voelde haar lichaam ook nauwelijks. In het Pieterbaancentrum liep ze dagenlang rond met een ernstige peesontsteking. Een collega van mij schrok van haar vervaarlijk gezwollen, pulserende hand. Zij lachte, zei dat ze nooit pijn voelde. Het was schrijnend te zien hoe hard ze het toch probeerde. Om te bestaan. Om er te zijn. Haar stem galde overal bovenuit. In groepen was ze overassertief. Maar in een gesprek over haar diepste zelf viel ze stil. Dan kwamen de tranen. Ik kijk naar anderen voor wat ik moet voelen, zei ze. En een andere keer, soms kijk ik in de spiegel om te zien of ik er nog wel ben. Als je gevoelsmatig nauwelijks bestaat, dacht ik, hoe kan je dan het bestaan van nieuw leven erkennen? Dat kon ze dan ook niet. Een paar jaar eerder werd ze onverwacht zwanger. Doodsbang was ze voor haar groeiende buik. Probeerde die te verdoezelen onder wijde truien. En vreemd genoeg lukte dat. Geen mens die vraagtekens plaatste bij haar. Ja, ik ben een beetje aangekomen. De bevalling was een haastklus. Stiekem alleen in bad. Het kindje werd doodgeboren, zei ze. Maar volgens justitie had zij hier zelf de hand in gehad. In elk geval borg ze het lichaampje op in een tas en begroef het even haastig. Maar wel in haar mooiste kleertjes, omringd door knuffels. Nu huilde ze hartstochtelijk om haar dochtertje, wier bestaan nooit meer had kunnen worden dan een glimp. Een vluchtig lichtpuntje, net als dat van haarzelf. Volgende heeft wel een titel, die heet Kerkhofjes. Aan een van mijn patiënten moet ik nog vaak denken. Een jonge kunstenares, vreselijk getalenteerd en vreselijk triest. Mijn vriendin, die als psychiater bij een behandelkliniek werkt, kijkt peinzend naar een pluk schapen in de mistige verte. Ondanks het druilerige weer zijn we al uren aan het wandelen. En zoals meestal praten we over ons werk. Vandaag vooral over zelfmoordpreventie. De jonge vrouw was al een tijdje bij ons opgenomen, vervolgt ze, met een eerste depressie. Geen behandeling sloeg aan. Maar ze had net nieuwe medicatie en ik dacht, nu komt er licht. Ze schraapt haar keel. Ik wist niet dat ze zo wanhopig was. Een totaal verkeerde inschatting. Even lopen we zwijgend door. In de regen die aarzelend uit de grauwe hemel komt. Misschien dichten we onszelf ook te veel macht toe, zeg ik na een tijdje. We willen iemand natuurlijk in leven houden. Zijn of haar levenslust teruggeven. We doen alles wat we kunnen, maar soms ligt het simpelweg buiten ons bereik. Is de taak te groot? We zijn God niet, glimlacht ze. Ik vind het ook niet erg dat die mensen in mijn hoofd blijven. Hoe pijnlijk ook. Ze horen bij mij. We hebben allemaal wel een eigen kerkhofje achter ons huis. Terwijl ik naar huis fiets, denk ik aan alle kerkhofjes achter ieders huizen. En hoe anders we daar allemaal mee omgaan. De verdachten die ik onderzoek hebben vaak flinke kerkhoven. En veelal tochtige, koude huizen. En tussen die twee lijkt er verband te bestaan. Of, zoals een onderzochte laatst tegen mij zei, niemand heeft ooit naar mij omgekeken, dus ik trek me ook van niemand wat aan. Zelf probeer ik te leven met mijn eigen kerkhof. Ik heb geprobeerd het te negeren, maar dan keert het zich tegen me. En dan droom ik van het vogeltje uit mijn jeugd. Als kind trof ik hem zomaar op een voorjaarsmiddag. Op de een of andere ongelukkige manier was hij in de sloot beland. Verloren dreef hij midden in de plas, zijn vleugels plat uitgespreid op het water, zijn kop net erboven. Gelijk begon mijn hart te bonken. Dat arme lieve diertje, ik ging hem redden. Doortastend brak ik een lange tak van een boom, sleepte die mee naar de sloot. Maar in plaats van het beestje eruit te vissen, bleef ik met gebalde vuisten staan. Met de tak aan mijn voeten stond ik daar maar en keek. Net zolang tot het donkere water zich sloot boven de laatste rimpelingen van het stil wegzinkende lijfje. Daarna rende ik huilend naar huis. Tot ver in mijn volwassenheid droomde ik over dat vogeltje. Toen ik een tijdje een droomboekje bijhield, zag ik het patroon. Het verscheen altijd als ik worstelde met schuldgevoelens. Naar een gescheiden vriendin die ik te weinig belde. Een oude oom waar ik echt langs moest. Soms denk ik, we moeten meer praten over onze kerkhofjes en hoe we ons daartoe verhouden. Het zegt veel over wie we zijn. Dank jullie wel.
Thank you Inge Schilperoort. It is impossible to translate it into English, what Inge just read us, but I was quite touched by it. I know you were writing these columns for Psychologie magazine, and that you were doing it also here when you were in at the Jan van Eyck. But they got, I read the first ones, they got to a more, I think they got to a more literary level, like samengebouwd, like really dense. I just quote in English, we all have a little graveyard behind our houses, which in the end you say, perhaps we need to talk a bit more about those graveyards. And that's, I know you work at the Peter Baan Center and write, well, also tell about the cases you have there. But it struck me that you also write personally about yourself in a way, certainly in the second column. So thank you. Asha Karami is here. Asha Karami was our last poet in residence, which doesn't mean we will stop with poets, but poets are also writers and can also apply for the writing residence. So Asha did the poet in residence program and then the writing in residence program. And then she sort of came back because a few weeks, went away a few weeks. So it feels like Asha's here since a long time and really part of the participants. And Asha also has an exhibition at the Open Studios that I would like you to see, or maybe some of you saw, or if you're watching on Zoom, YouTube or Vimeo, come here next week, July the 1st, 2nd or 3rd, and watch the Total Open Studios because it's very special. And it was special for me to see that Asha made visual work too. I know she studied photography. I was, and this doesn't, I don't say that I want to, I don't say it in a possessive term, but I was a teacher of Asha in a writing school. Amsterdam has a very old-fashioned writing school, and it's totally different than the Jan van Eyck because I'm a poet and they're students and they make poetry. And they have a lot of other teachers. It's not, I don't feel a big influence on the career that Asha made. Moreover, because when she came in my class, and I already heard from Arie van den Berg, she was very good before, she already had her own style. And like you can very much hear it on how she's reading her own poetry, that she already then had her own voice. And for me, Asha didn't change so much, which I think is a good sign. She started strong. And afterwards, she debuted with Godface, by the Bezige Bij, with the Busy Bee, the most famous Dutch publishing house, a big publishing house. The book got 4 nominations, including the Grote Poëzieprijs, the big poetry prize, which over the years, when it was still the VSB prize, only went to older poets, but it was just simply for the best poetry book of the year. So you can also nominate a debut. There still talks about, is that good? Because then you already get a big nomination for a big prize for your first book, but okay. I think Asha is the 3rd one who was nominated for her debut for this, which was important, important recognition. Well, I can say more about what you are doing here. I want to mention one more thing, and this is very special to me too. I once was debuted in 1996 in Perdu Poetry Center of Amsterdam, and they don't know there at all what I'm doing now here, because as we know, Maastricht is not very close to Amsterdam. Sometimes cities in other countries are closer to it. But Asha made programs in Perdu just after the lockdown, or maybe during the lockdown, with a lot of the artists that are on the Jan van Eyck, and I thought this was very special, that she showed in Amsterdam the quality which is happening in the Jan van Eyck. And this was not literature programs, but combined art, food. Hamja was there, Ashley was there, with other poets. I think I said enough, no? I think I give you the stage.
I'm gonna read one poem, and it kind of, I don't know how it exactly started, but I think in a few days before I came to Jan van Eyck, I found this photo album on the street, and it was like without pictures, but there were still descriptions of the pictures. And so, yeah, first I cleaned it because of Corona, and then I looked in it, and the descriptions were very interesting, like also descriptions of all the names of the people in a picture, or which street it is, which vacations, marriages, funerals, all those things. So I don't know, I kind of connected it also with something that I was already interested in, and that was the descriptions of every picture that we put on Facebook, on Instagram, social media. They all get like a description, and you can, you can in a way find this description by another program and see what this is. So, it also for me was connected to somehow crime scene photography and descriptions of forensic descriptions of wounds or dead bodies. So somehow these descriptions of things that are already gone but are somehow somewhere collected and forever somewhere. I don't know. So somehow I connected those all and made some poetry with it, and also some silkscreen prints. So I'll read the poem that is also in my room at the moment with the silkscreen prints, and also with a video made by Johan van Dijken. So for now, I'll only read the poem. And I have the translation, but in a way I didn't make the PowerPoint very good, so like it is not fully visible, but well, I'm sorry for that. So I'll start. Permanent nachtbeeld. Tenminste één persoon thuis. Zwangere vrouw zit ontspannen op een bank in een woonkamer, terwijl ze online tv kijkt. Ze verlangt naar een lange rit in de zon. Het afbeeldsel bevat zijaanzicht van een kat, regen, een lange afstand, iets wat u vanmorgen aanraakte, iets wat u nu aanraakt. Iemand die te oud werd. Kan een garage bevatten, 3 kinderen wachten en anderen binnenshuis, die om oude mensen geven misschien. Eén ontdekte dat hij niet bedrogen was. 1 persoon, liggend, nee, knielend. De opgeslagen afbeelding is een slapende foto in een la. Opgeslagen ergens in je lijf, de geur van brandend vlees en zomer. Misschien heeft de illustratie een innerlijke tekst. Vooraanzicht van een aantrekkelijke zakenvrouw in formele kleding die e-mails checkt. Op een smartphone tijdens haar pauze in stedelijke omgeving. Of nu thuis. Het cijfer is 2. Mensen, planten, 2 vijanden spelen muziekinstrumenten. Indien ze niet geteld kunnen worden, bestaan ze niet. Beeld kan ongeveer verontrustend nieuws bevatten. Ga zitten en drink. Mogelijk geen thuisafbeelding. Bewegende beelden. Vrouw en een beeldontwerper. Gooien bakstenen door ruiten. Of denken erover. Afdruk van zichzelf. Arrestatiebewegingen. 16-jarige omlijst een overleden vrouw. 1 persoon. Lachend. Geen hemel. 1 scherm en ingekapseld. Of misschien, mooi Aziatische tiener kijkt uit het raam. Gapende ogen, wijn op het tapijt, samenvallend punt van leven en dood. Dezelfde jurk. 'S Nachts kan de foto eindigen. Bijschrift niet beschikbaar. Portret. Boom, schoenen, auto en binnen. Download duurt 3 minuten. Interieur tijdelijk niet beschikbaar. Bevalt maagdelijk. Voedsel. In 6 aparte kaders. Dansen voor de spiegel. Kijken recht in de lens en liplezen. Dingen hier te doen. Het beeld is gehuisvest in 1 of meer personen. Zittend op de tafel. Opslag van beelden in lichaamsopeningen. Fotopotentieel. Figuur. Schaduw van een staand kind aan een zwembad. Afgietsel. Binnenaanzicht van een bekende zwarte zangeres. Waarschijnlijk op het podium. Kunstmatig verlicht. Vrolijke vrouw. Verfrissende koffiewinkel. Rustig. Wandeling. Leuke. Positief. Vrouwelijk. Strand. Geniet. 1 persoon, geen draagkracht. 1 lucht. Aura, staand, bevalling. Niveau 1. Apparaat. Stoel. Paniek. Via oud fotoprogramma. Zonder deze. Een toekomstige hond. Weergave dansend laten vallen. 1 boom. Liggend. Rook. 1 kind. Oud nachtbeeld. Permanent nacht. Permanent en nacht. Thank you very much.
Dankjewel, Asha. Thank you, Asha. I don't know if any of you saw a line between Shana, Inge, and Asha, or a sort of comparison. You can say it shows how varied our literature program can be. Maybe we'll find a connection of all of them when we arrive to our last and final guest, the non-book presentation of Frederik Willem Daam, which will be happening now. And to announce it, I brought this book by John Berger because Frederik and me have always been talking about John Berger. And it's called in Dutch, En onze gezichten, mijn hart vluchtig als foto's. I need my glasses for dit. And our faces, my heart breathe as photos. In the colophon in small letters. It is always something special to be the first somewhere, like to be the first the student of a new department in Maastricht of Cultural Studies by Wil Kosters. That was Micha Wertheim, the famous, celebrated, but still a bit strange cabaretier, we say. Well, showman, to be the first poet in residence in Maastricht in 2013, which I enjoyed, to be the first writer in residence, as Nina Weijers was, to be the first Flemish writers in residence in Jan van Eyck Academy. What was Frederik Willem Daam, and this was really in the middle of the second lockdown. And I sort of, I wasn't here. I was watching like on the land to a ship for a long telescope to if it was going all right here, and we were emailing a lot. And I don't know, he learned me to that there's also a chat function on Instagram. And but to say it like that, I had the feeling we became friends, because it was a sort of intensive. Well, to see if everything was all right, like you were on your studio, first, no, in an apartment, writing, a small apartment, and it was very strange what could be done and not in the academy at the time, but you managed to work very, very hard, I think, and you showed me the text you made, and well, it was a great experience. And now, since being the first Flemish writer in residence at Jan van Eyck, we will have more, but we started with you, and that will never be forgotten. Zelfs de vogels vallen, Even the Birds Fall, is a book of short stories by Frederik Willem Daam, and he wrote the cover of every of the damn 1,000 copies at the Busy Bee, the Bezige Bij himself. And there's a film of that. I think it took you 8 hours or so to write 12 hours at the office of the Bezige Bij. This is the second edition, so this is printed, but for the rest it's his own signature. It shows a bit of the artist that Frederik Willem Daam is. Then came out Signs of Life, Tekens van Leven, and we talked about this with Koen Peters and you. A book about a bar, a dedication to a very, very Flemish bar in Antwerp, I guess. I thought it was Brussels, but it must be Antwerp. A book I liked very much. And then there is also, your exhibition downstairs at the Open Studios, which are, we say schilden, signs of these, not the motorways in Belgium, but in Belgium you have, we call it the steenwegen. I don't know if there's an English word for that. But it are a sort of smaller roads between cities, and there's everything on them. There's shops you can buy, things you never can buy in cities. And when I drive there, I always feel I'm in America. Like, this is something you never see in Holland. So I had a sort of obsession with this sort of, not taking a motorway, but these small ways. And there were a sort of placats, a sort of symbols for, well, regional things. And you took these symbols and made art of that. And that's now downstairs at Open Studios. Apart from that, we worked on you worked on a story, and you let me read it. Belvedere Montprudent. Belvedere, yeah. And I think that's what you're going to read to us, or part of it. So, Frederik Willem Daam.
Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. I'm indeed going to read a story that I wrote while I was here. It is set in the mountains. I was sort of writing a novel that was set in the mountains as a long walk towards John Berger, because I ended up in the Alps 4 years or something ago. By coincidence, true love like that happens. And John Berger was very close, the writer and art critic, lived very close to the place I ended up in and still frequent often. But he of course passed away roughly the same time I got there. And this is actually a story that I wrote that is based on the first walk that I made. Maybe in nature would be too much, but I've always been sort of a city kid, and Brussels is a very urbanized region, so I never really had close ties to nature. And I remembered being there for the first time and viewing this scenery through the eyes of the person I loved, and so seeing it through her eyes made me love it in a way as well. And it became this sort of, or this story became this sort of parable of the impossibility to actually relate to nature as being a modern human being. And unfortunately, I printed out the wrong copy, so I'll be reading it in Dutch. But I hope the introduction already gave you a sort of idea of what I'm about to read. Al een week of 3 zit zijn moederziel alleen in de chalet die haar grootvader hier op een toen nog lege heuvel had gebouwd. Zonder wagen of wifi leeft ze de dagen op het ritme van de zon, lezend, kokend, kijkend en klikkend op de sluiter wanneer het licht haar dat dicteert. Ze had geen nood aan contact, merkte hij in die weken die hij zelf thuis doorbracht. Hij hoorde haar nauwelijks en snapte niet hoe ze het kon of deed opgaan in deze wereld van eenvoud en eenzaamheid. Voor hem was het allemaal nieuw. De stad is waar hij zich thuis voelt. Zijn gedachten verspringen op het tempo van verkeerslichten. Het voedt hem, beweert hij. Zoals hij een organisme is de metropool er ook een. En die codependentie wordt hem hier en nu voor het eerst duidelijk, omdat hij zich tot haar verhoudt. En zij zich op haar beurt tot mij, de berg. Something I forgot. The story is told from the perspective of the mountain. I started somewhere midway, but that's actually an important part of the story. That it's a walk up a mountain by this very fresh and young couple, and the story is told by him. So he sees them and he notices these things he notices this dynamic between the two that he finds offsetting in a way. Niet dat hij er nog nooit was geweest in de natuur. Hij had wel al eens gekajakt op de lessen en was al eens gaan kamperen met vrienden in de hoge Kempen. Al was dat stevast met de nodige terughoudendheid tegenover wat hem omringde. Meer dan eens liet hij zich betrappen op stellingen als ik vertrouw dat gras niet, of wanneer een insect te dichtbij kwam. Ik heb respect voor de natuur, maar ze moet ook het nodige respect opbrengen voor mij. Natuurlijk was dit ook deels pose, een manier om zich te verhouden tot het onbekende. Het was een rol waarmee hij door de jaren heen samen was gevallen en die hij hier achterwege liet, opdat hij indruk kon maken op haar. Dat deze omgeving hem daarbij zo zou beroeren, was een welgekomen neveneffect. Hij had niet verwacht zo overweldigd te zijn als de temperatuur in een oogwenk daalde of steeg. Hoe gemakkelijk het geluk werd, vanaf hij de vermoeidheid in zijn benen vergat, zo beangstigend was het terloopse aanzicht van een ravijn wanneer de diepte hem naar haar toezoog. Hij besefte al deze dingen vaak pas wanneer zij halt houdt, zoals ze occasioneel doet om door de zoeker van haar logge camera te gluren. Dan weet hij dat hij de komende minuten op zichzelf aangewezen is en kijkt hij meer dan ooit door haar ogen naar wat hen omringt. De kleine waterbronnetjes die als gedachten uit het niets ontspringen, het korstmos dat zijn kleur zo schilderachtig aan de steen onttrekt. Wat houdt hij van de manier waarop in de verte de sneeuw de hoogte van de bergen benadrukt? De pieken die grillig als een vlam omhoog schieten om daar in alle geslotenheid te zijn gesluierd. Terwijl zij een nieuw rolletje film in het toestel steekt, ademt hij diep de geur van de bloemen in of van de mest van de koeien die vrijelijk langs het pad grazen en zo imposant zijn dat hij er in een brede cirkel rondgaat. Zij, die het niet kan laten ze te willen voederen, het ruwe orgaan haar hand aftastend als vingers, die in het donker een schakelaar zoeken. Is dit het echte leven? Vraagt hij zichzelf af. En ik kan voelen hoe graag hij zijn arm om haar nek wil leggen. Waarom durft hij dat dan niet? Hij heeft dat toch al zo vaak voordien gedaan. Waarom ziet hij hen toch als een steen die hij de berg dient op te rollen? Of is dat juist het probleem? Lig ik tussen hen in? Zie hem achter haar aanlopen, alsof hij haar schaduwt. Wanneer zij naar links kijkt, doet hij dat ook. Af en toe ziet ze om, zich afvragend of hij nog volgt. Dan kijkt ze naar zijn voet en wendt hij zijn blik af. Ze zucht. Volgens mij hadden we de kapel nu toch al moeten zien, zegt ze. Hij heeft haar niet verstaan. De kapel, volgens mij hadden we er al moeten zijn. Ja, zegt de jongen zeer rustig. We hebben de andere weggenomen. Ik heb dat daarnet gezien op de telefoon. En je zegt niks. Het is toch niet dat het iets had uitgemaakt? Maar je vond het wel belangrijk genoeg om te verifiëren. Waarom wordt ze nu zo kwaad? Ze kent hem toch? Ze weet toch dat hij het niet kan laten te moeten weten? Het geluid van hun voeten die zich in de zompige aarde wrikken, vult de stilte. Zullen we hier anders ergens lunchen, vraagt hij, wetende dat niets haar zo gelukkig maakt als eten. Iets verderop vinden ze geschikte steen. Hij haalt het halve volkoren brood en de kaas uit zijn rugzak, waarop ze zich gretig ontfermen over hun sobere maaltijd. Ze bevinden zich nu ruimschoots over de helft, denkt hij gezien te hebben op zijn telefoon. Iets meer dan 1 kilometer zullen ze uiteindelijk in hoogte zijn gestegen. Maar het loont. Van op mijn top zie je op een heldere dag gemakkelijk tot voorbij de Mont Blanc, 40 kilometer verderop. Is het nog lang, vraagt hij. Iets over de helft, zegt ze. En ze eet een kwartje appel. Halfweg zijn we natuurlijk boven pas, zegt hij, en hij eet de randjes van de kaas op die zij laat liggen en die scherp, bijna pikant smaken. Daarna biedt hij haar lief het eindje van het brood aan. Nog voor de laatste happen zijn doorgeslikt, heeft hij het zakje tabak en de vloeitjes al in zijn handen. Hij trekt een paar plukjes uit het grotere kluwen, verspreidt ze over het blaadje en rolt met duim en wijsvinger de ene zijde over en uiteindelijk onder de andere. Hij likt de sigaret dicht, tikt met de onderkant op zijn nagel. In stilte kijken ze hoe de rook langzaam oplost in het landschap. Zal ik straks de camera even dragen? Vraagt hij. Nee, zegt ze, het gaat wel. Als hij er niet is, dient ze die toch ook zelf te dragen. Aan wie doet zij mij nu toch denken? Dat is de vraag die mij al die tijd al plaagt. Het is haast alsof ze hier altijd al is geweest en toch kan ik haar niet thuisbrengen. Het ene jaar verdringt het andere. Laag per laag vloeien de herinneringen in elkaar over, zoals het sediment zichzelf tot steen perst. Een zoveelste seizoen, de koeien die opkomen, de zon die het hout van de huizen zwart blakert, de winter die het dorp onder de sneeuw begraaft, de boeren die schaarser worden, de razernij waarmee het ene huis na het andere neergezet wordt, om vervolgens leeg te staan. In de weide, de bijen die nooit genoeg krijgen, van bloem naar bloem, naar bloem, naar bloem. Ja.
Thank you, Frederik. Schoon gelezen zou ik Vlaams willen zeggen. It was a good reading. Thank you, Frederick. I just want to say that this was the writing program of the Jan van Eyck Open Studios 2021. We will be back here on September 23 with Jente Postuma, having a dialogue with Esther Gerritsen. I want to say that this program is made possible for 50% by the Dutch Literature Foundation and for 25% by both Passaporta de Buren and Literatuur Vlaanderen. And we are collaborating with the Buren. And I want to, we are at the Buren, I already said, with the Tribune, the very good bookshop in Maastricht. And thank you PJ and Margriet and Jo for having me as a guest in the Prelab this week. Thank you Anne van Gronsveld and the technicians, Emil Schwang and Hamid Suleiman. And we'll see each other again. Bye-bye.
So we end and have a break of a couple of minutes, so to have a new setup for the film of Hamza Hassan, and Bruno will introduce the film in a minute. Okay, see you back. Thank you.
If I can, maybe I can ask a question. I'm curious to know how did you encounter each other, or how did Tom encounters Hamza work, and then the process of adaptation of a book that has achieved so much into a documentary. or a fictional documentary. So tell us more about that process of encountering and then translating.
Tom is just one of my fangirls.
Yeah, I actually found Hamja's book in the artist in the film who did the music, Art School Girlfriend. She plays the song at the end and she created the composition. She has a bookshop for introverts in Margate. It's a very small shop. And I found Hamja's book in that shop. And yeah, I was just immediately sort of overwhelmed by all of the incredible conceptual ideas within it, and just felt like I needed to speak to the author. So we managed to connect online, and then went for a coffee. And yeah, the more I found out about Hamja's background and what he'd been through, the more fascinating I felt it became. So that's where it began. And then we were fortunate to get some support and funding from the BFI Documentary Society.
That's the British Film Institute. Sorry.
The Film Institute, yeah. The BFI.
Yeah.
And then I think there's so many ideas within Hamja's book and Hamja's work. It was really fun just to sort of, I mean, we could have created probably a film 10 times the length, or a series or a feature film. There was so much work we did together in the development phase. It's so rich with interesting imagery, and yeah, the 20-minute version you've seen was difficult to cut down.
So Black Dog Films, which produce the film, they're a branch of Ridley Scott's production company. So Tom took me to the office, and you see these clapperboards, and there's clapperboards from Blade Runner, Thelma Louise, Alien, and then you say, oh, are they really from the film set? And they're like, yes, it is. And then they take you around the offices, and then you see the helmet from Gladiator and the alien suit and the Blade Runner props and stuff like that, which was cool. And then, yeah.
It's a cool context in order to have creative discussions, definitely.
Can you do that? We have a question from Hisham, the director of Jan van Eyck.
Thank you so much. Welcome, Tom. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Hamja, for the screening. I really, really loved it, and it's a beautiful film. Although short, I feel that there's more. Also, it's a very pertinent subject. I was actually wondering, Tom, were you engaged with the subject before, or was it new to you? As it was new to me, actually, when Hamja came into the Jan van Eyck to hear about subjects related to neurodiversity. How was it in the beginning? You've read the book, so you didn't know Hamja then, right?
I didn't know Hamja. Thank you for your kind words, by the way, and for having the film shown here. I really appreciate that. I think I've been loosely connected with the subject for a long time. I have close members of my family who are my brother is an artist and also has bipolar disorder. It's always been something I've enjoyed, the sort of connection between neurodiversity and creativity and art, and where those things intersect. And I personally studied psychology at university, and it was it's always been an interest, but definitely I never thought about these things in the way that I discovered in Hamja's book. And I've learned a huge amount from working with Hamja and reading how he connects these ideas. So it felt like something I'd wanted to really delve into and work with for a long time because of the relationship I have with my brother. It felt like a great opportunity to explore some of these ideas in more detail. So I guess it's something I been looking to work on for a while, but I think some of the ways in which Hamja presents these difficult subjects in incredibly creative, accessible way. That's what makes it exciting art for me.
Yeah, exactly. And film also exacerbates that. Film also makes the access even better, I assume.
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, that's what I was really keen to do. I think the book's full of these ideas, like I said, like the introvert rescue center, and there's the chapter in that book where, you know, you can dial a number and have someone rescue you on a night out and things like that. They're incredibly funny, like visual ideas that you could, yeah, we, I, I'd love to develop even further, but that's what my aim was with the film, to capture these like imagined ideas and this imagined reality in a way that was accessible to people to then explore some of the deeper realities that Hamja's experienced.
I also gave Tom like a I guess a political education, so I made him watch William Klein's film on Black Panther, Elridge Cleaver, and there were a few other. I think there's a amazing film about Mozambique, the British Guantanamo Bay detainee, who's an amazing advocate for civil liberties, and yeah, I think we watched, and me and Tom were just really bonded over. I have a group on Facebook called People of Color who love white indie music, and yeah, 1990s. I think it was Iggy Pop. I think we just talked about Iggy Pop a lot, and then I also find this so. I my first love, you know, I had this period as a student where I wanted to be a decolonial warrior or whatever, but my first true love is white indie music, and what I found interesting was how so Arlo Parks, who you see in the film. So I'm really deviating too much, but let me get my head back on track. Yeah, so I find this these reinterpretations of the 1990s and all these angsty classics really interesting. So, God, I'm going totally off tangent. Yeah. So yeah. So
not at all, actually, because I mean, maybe what I feel, and now I have you here, so I can ask you some questions. Hamja, it's your topic of neurodiversity actually is not only about specifically neurodiversity. It taps into other subjects as well. It taps into other spaces of, let's say, emancipation, or where people are struggling or fighting in order to be heard. Huh? And that is super interesting. It is a spectrum that starts maybe, as you say, in indie music. That's one side of it. But it has another side too, such as the Black Panthers or any independence struggle, which is amazing because it's not only about neurodiversity. And this is also a question to you. How do you navigate that space? Because for you, it's quite easy. But how do you get that translated into structures such as the Jan van Eyck, into other structures? And so I want to ask you this question. You came here to the Jan van Eyck, and you've taught us a lot. You've taught us really a lot. How do we change our structures? What are our biases in relation to the struggles that you pose for us? Yeah. So how can we navigate what you do, which is specifically on one side about neurodiversity, but it taps into all these different strands? How do you see us navigate this? How do you see us change our structures? And this is specifically to Jan van Eyck, right? But you can. This is so broad, in fact. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does. I find I actually import a lot from like Britain and London, which is like Britain's actually quite progressive in some ways in terms of most arts institutions do acknowledge neurodiversity. Tate Modern and Tate Exchange, which is a branch of Tate Modern. There's a room in Tate Modern called the Quiet Room. You can sit there and it's your right to quiet, safeguarded, almost on a statutory level. And within Jeremy Corbyn, who's in the film, who's one of the few politicians I sincerely and deeply love. He was a huge supporter of the Kurdistan struggle and a huge supporter in Palestine and was punished for it, and a huge supporter of my family. There was a branch within his Labour, Socialist Labour vision called neurodivergent labor. And it was trade unionists from the autistic spectrum who introduced in policy and motions and statutes into employment legislation. I find the way in which the book has impacted people is just through endless touring. So I've done nearly 100 tour dates in, I think, a dozen different countries, from Canada to Slovenia and a lot in the Netherlands. And I was very touched that, so for example, I spoke at the National Assemblies for Palestine Activism in Rotterdam, and there's a lot of Show Radicals fans in Rotterdam. So even the code of conduct within the activist movement was like, we have to give introverts and extroverts equal weight, and it was written into it. And then there were also employment structures which in terms of the interview process and discrimination within Scotland, where it also has a fan base, where people who were part of institutions wrote that into policy. So it was like statutory protected. With the neurodiversity movement, sorry, I'm leaving Tom, it was very much, they adopted me, and that wasn't a conscious part. When I wrote the book, that wasn't a conscious part of the journey. Now I'm like a key fixture in I don't know, neurodiversity conferences. I don't know if Tom, you have anything.
I'm not sure what I can contribute there to changing the structure of the academy, but I think.
How did it alter your, like, you work in a particular way? Tom directs some amazing music videos, and I guess does MTV mean anything for younger generations? But like, actually, so Tom introduced me to a lot of really good autistic bands, which I never heard of. So the guy in the film who's improvising that dialogue, which I think is brilliant, in the circle where we're like, oh, have you been told to cheer up? He's from a band, he's a guitarist in a band called the Autistics, spelt with an X. Tell me more about them, actually, and the people, and Tom's, so a lot of the cast in the film are actually from bands, from Crystal Bats to Art School Girlfriend to. So how do you bring all these music thing? And yeah,
I mean, I think my filmmaking work's been totally inspired by working with Julian Temple, the director, for the last 10 years. I've worked on about 5 or 6 of his films now, and he sort of creates documentary work in which reality and fiction often overlap. And for example, in the last film we did about Ibiza, he had the guy Bez from the Happy Mondays playing a Ibicencan god, Bez, and there's just fun, conceptual ideas, and I think that's what I like to do with the documentary work I create, is bring artists into film in more meaningful ways than just using their music. And it's important to me to work with artists, and like in a more textured way, find out more about what their like lives and experiences and realities represent in that. I think that's what's such a brilliant part of documentary filmmaking is. You've got the ability to well, especially in this instance, because it wasn't commissioned for a channel or anything, there was no one telling us it had to be a particular structure. We could be really loose and open with the way it was put together, and the narrative's totally unconventional, and no one really minded. So I'm not sure we'll have this experience again, but yeah, in answer to your question, Hamza, yeah, I just love introducing different artists and from different mediums and backgrounds, and watching how people collaborate and work together. It always creates totally unexpected results.
Thank you, Tom, Hamza, and Hisham. For someone like me who struggles with anxiety, because I thought to not answer this or ask this question, it's more of an insight or a multi-layered statement to the fact that the subject of the movie is very present. the people who right now experience the angst and the oppression. And Hisham asks about how do you, take this awareness that your frame brings or your work brings, and how do you work with that? And for me as a Nigerian, who I see that there is a need for an ideology shift, and I see how you have been able to come up with an idea of Uzbekistan and then put that to film. I think the question then is how are you able to, find stillness in all the things that affect the emotions as you write, as you create? How do you take these impulses and how do you then make your decisions of what to focus your energies on? Because sometimes you can get overwhelmed by that, by watching the film. Also, as a Muslim, a lot of things that come to mind, a lot of things that are very present. And how do you bring that into the present after we have seen this film? How do we, after this screening, take this consciousness and how can we, use this insight that you have now shared with us, and how can we take that and engage with it in our current practice? So how do you do that, Tom? How do you do that, Hamja? And what are the projections for the things you have to do? Because yes, the film is great. Yes, the book is great. But right now, there are people who are still within these situations. And how do you, or how are you of service to that? So that's my statement and question. I don't know if it's clear, but I just wanted to ask that.
I think it's a really important time to listen to and find new ways of opening up the conversation and listening to people who might not typically feel like they have a voice. I think that's vital in all industries and communities. Just this moment of realization that maybe someone isn't being heard and ideas are being lost and people don't have a voice, like just trying to create a platform. That's what I found personally of great value in making the film, was connecting with people that I knew the book resonated with and just asking them what it was about the book and how that related to their particular experience in their particular culture, country, or industry. So I think right now that's the journey that I'm personally trying to explore further, like try and listen to people who feel like they don't have a voice and find out for whatever reason. I don't know. What do you think, Hamja?
I think I don't know. I don't even know if I'm answering the question. I find music fandom creates clusters of people around. I mean, before I was diagnosed as bipolar, I don't know. There were ways in which there was, like for example, I don't know, Star Trek is like a gathering of people with autism sometimes, or that's a common example. And then goth music and like I don't know. I feel there's all these informal gatherings which are beyond. I don't even know if I answered the question. Sorry, beyond clinical or professional, or like those sorts of understandings. That I think that's totally. I think I just didn't comprehend what was that. Like, I'm also interested in the multiple geographies. I mean, the film is very much tied to my life growing up in London. And the book has a really global fan base. So there's some of the people in the film are from Mexico City, and there's a Spanish translation coming out, and they have their own narratives tied to those particular areas. And same within, I'd be interested in how it would relate to your childhood in Nigeria, or Kanthi, who's one of the participants here. She came up to me and when I was being quite emo and moody, and told me how much the book meant to her, and she was a fan of it. And we remapped the book in Beijing, where she grew up, and Chinese childhood, and yeah, that's another way of opening up. So I'm sorry, I haven't. That yeah.
I have a question also on the chat. It's from Clementine Deli. Hamja, can you please talk about the style of your manifesto, the book and the studio project? Why did you bring Abbas Zahidi into the mix?
So for people who don't know, during the Open Studios, I've done a real-life functioning Islamic prayer room, which me and Odessa Khan, one of the other practicing Muslims, we just use. It's functional. And so Friday, which is the holy day for Muslims, where we do Jummah prayers, you have a khutbah, which is like a sermon, and it sometimes brings social and political issues.
Make me a host.
So Abbas Zaidi was commissioned on Friday to deliver the khutbah. I sort of thought of everything I've done at Jan van Eyck Academy for Open Studios one coherent whole, which departs from conversations like a family network. So next week there'll be 2 roundtables, one on Islamophobia and the war on terror, and one on neurodiversity. So Abbas Zaidi, he's a British Iranian artist, and he's become quite large. He was in Venice Biennale. He's in Tate Modern's collection, and for one of the most famous acts he did Jummah prayers, which is Friday prayers inside Tate Modern. And so I invited him to do some reflections, which you can watch on the Jan van Eyck Academy's screening section of the Open Studio, so people can watch that. I'd like to just, I mean, there's a lot of communities that just aren't represented within either audiences. I mean, I look at the names of the people, of attendees every day at the Jan van Eyck Academy, and I don't know, there's certain constituencies that aren't even part of the conversation, whether theoretically, historically, and I just want to expand that too. If that makes sense, yeah, and represent where I guess I come from. Abbas Zaidi is someone I've worked with. There was a Muslim creative space called Rumi's Cave in London, and it's a place for many activist events, and bringing that into the general. Making the audience more equal and representative, if that makes sense, which I view as involved in everything I do. Yeah.
Do you have more questions for Tom? Or Tom, maybe you have some questions from Hamza. There's a question also for the audience, if you want an extra minute to think about.
I can wait.
Sure, no, go for it.
No, I was just thinking about that. I would like to share that I read the book and just watched the film, and it feels so different one from the other somehow. I mean, it's a classic kind of a sensation around, but I work a lot with sound, and I think like the book and this idea and this utopian imaginary place, which is Aspergistan, you build so well in the book that your imagination aligns with this utopian place. And yeah, I don't know, sound also has this abstract room for imagination, and then with the film I guess you have to to fill this gap, no, in a way, because it's this medium, and then I don't know, I guess just sharing that, and maybe also be nice to comment on that.
I do like Tom's vision of the film is Tom's vision, and it's involved in his creative community in Margate, and particular experience of growing up in Britain in the 1990s, and that's just one particular narrative and orientation of the film. But the future of Shy Radicals for me is commissioning, editing. There's a whole body of work now globally made by fans of Shy Radicals autonomously without much of my knowledge. So in Belgium, there were some robots that were wandering around Belgium that were made by Shy Radicals fans there, and there have been other short films and through other people's imaginaries and fan fiction. And I'm interested in that, and they're just as relevant and equal. And and also certain things happen in the film process. So, for example, we made a real life introvert emergency rescue hotline which people could dial up, and then in the film, in the book, it's a joke. It's supposed to be just funny. I mean, it is painful funny, but then every conversation that came through that hotline was actually, as you heard in the film, quite painful and distressing. That's so it's almost like that public participation and processing shaped some of the visions, and there were also there were. Yeah, so I that's how I see it. So I see Tom as like one vision, and there's more to come. And like I haven't even remotely finished with Shy Radicals. I consider it my life mission. And I have fans in Brazil who've integrated the anti-Bolsonaro movement. I'm interested in everything. But I did grow up in South London in the 1990s, and there's a lot of. And I mean, a lot of the people who read the book have no idea who I am. They have no idea about my brother, and I'm totally happy with that. And I guess there's things like The Simpsons, which are read in multiple ways by different generations, and there's a lot of contextual stuff people won't understand. But I'm happy with like the other imaginary visions. But I don't know.
I think it was important to me anyway to try and give a reflection of Hamza and his approach to how he works in the film. So maybe rather than being a direct iteration of like what the book is and represents to so many different people, I was really interested in just finding out more about Hamza and how he comes to these ideas and why he wrote the book. And I think the moments where we created the imagined scenes from Shy Radicals was an opportunity to explore some of those things visually. So it's by no means an attempt to perfectly reflect what everyone might read into it being, and it was a very collaborative effort as well. There were obviously lots of people involved in the music composition, the art direction, so I totally appreciate that comment. I think even those aspects of the film that Hamza was surprised how I personally saw things, but I suppose everyone's got a totally different reading. It's so layered, and I guess it relates to everyone's experience in a unique way.
I was just thinking with myself that somehow the book gives slightly more room for hope, in a way. I don't know if maybe it's just my mood today, but I guess it's interesting to collect these sensations also, because the message and the content is so powerful that it's nice to know how people feel, I guess.
But for me, the hope in the movie is actually the music, and I think Tom and Hamza and a lot of people here shared a lot within music and music that we listen together and play together. But I have a direct question for Hamza, whether these spaces of quietness or spaces of music where you can feel yourself, can you feel yourself anew, can also drag yourself out of moments of despair, like the hole that Inyas dug for himself. I also know the soundtrack that he was listening to while doing that. I think that helped him through the process of digging for clay. Do you think you want to move also towards that space yourself? You're sort of like the Iggy Pop, the rock star of shyness, sitting there in this shiny bright lights. Is that something you aspire? do you think there is more in there, sort of to give people hope, to give people a new direction? I think Adesokan's question was also about that.
I think it's such a profound thing to reflect on, whether the film or the book is more hopeful. In regard to music, there's also multiple ways that the film is going to be screened. So it's toured film festivals, and we've done this the first what you call cinema type setting in Ljubljana Biennial, which will open in September. It will be screened as a gallery installation, as a loop gallery installation, and the exhibition is called "I Don't Belong Here," taking the line from Radiohead's "Creep," and the part of and even part of that film, I'm doing a Spotify soundtrack, which is for just wandering around the city on your own. I don't know about, I sort of, when I feel really down, I actually listen to Iggy Pop. Me and David, he asked a question, both Iggy Pop fans, so is Tom, because of the, I guess, I was going to make an Iggy Pop zine whilst I was here called Fuck Up and Survive, given he'd gone through every like form of annihilation that other rock stars had been through, but had somehow remained alive. I'd also be fascinated to see the soundtrack for Digging a Hole as well. Yeah.
No, that's
it. We have a question from Abu Alamgir online. Thanks, Abu. Can quiet people be leaders in activist movements?
Totally. I actually, part of the whole process of doing Shy Radicals is retracing that history. And I mean, we've got very concrete examples. So the guy who introduced the welfare state, the National Health Service, the universal healthcare, the Arts Council England, Clement Attlee, the 1945 Prime Minister, very shy, awkward guy in the age of charismatic fascism from Mussolini. And he won 2 elections, landslide elections against Winston Churchill, and probably the best Prime Minister Britain ever had. And I'm also inspired. Greta Thunberg wasn't a big figure at all when I wrote the book. I love Greta Thunberg. The way she can go on, she's totally reinvented what a mainstream celebrity can be. She can go on a mainstream chat show, not make eye contact with the host, and come across as powerful and amazing. And I'm also interested in history of colonialism. Like, so my heroes, my anti-colonial heroes are the Irish Republicans, and I think Tom's Irish, of Irish origin. Patrick Pearse, he led the 1916 Easter Uprising in Dublin, which is the first major anti-colonial revolt when 90% of the world is under European colonialism, and he drafts the statement of arms, leads this armed struggle against the British Empire, and inspires people like Marcus Garvey, Nehru, and this guy, he's retrospectively diagnosed as autistic. He was very shy and awkward, but was a brilliant militant revolutionary leader. And people even say people like Malcolm X were shy. Also, like Rosa Parks, and the way she does the bus boycott is an entirely different way of interacting. And then Trump, which Tom includes in the film, and Nigel Farage, which is probably less familiar to you. I get you got Geert Wilders here, but I see them as embodiments of extrovert supremacy. I also borrow a lot of my political ideas from teen movies, like Mean Girls and Winona Ryder films. And it's strange, the most solemn activist community you go to, it's still structured like Mean Girls. There's still the Mean Girls table. I mean, there's even the Mean Girls table here in Jan van Eyck Academy, right? And power is still like that. They still use this language of teen movies in the highest level of global power. So President Trump is described as a like high school jock bully, right? And then Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, lost because he was a nerd or something like that. my brother's lawyer, this wonderful woman called Gareth Pearce, who is represented everyone, the Irish. So this doesn't mean much in the Netherlands, but the many injustices during the Troubles and the Guantanamo Bay prisoners and Hillsborough, which probably doesn't mean much. But all these cases of injustice, but she speaks like a mouse, and I think there's something about speaking like a mouse which is closer to the truth in times of mass hysteria and like headline circuses, and those people are all my inspirations, and totally, I think it's a fallacy to think that only extroverts can be in power, but they often occupy spaces or like as if they're naturally in charge. Do you think introverts could be leaders?
I think there is definitely an argument to say that quieter people should be given more space to contribute to political discussions right now. Definitely. I think like learning about Gareth Pearce during our work was really fascinating. Just the way that she spoke during, the court footage surrounding your brother's case was really profound to see. So yeah, I think more examples of that would be good inspiration for quieter people to sort of find space to contribute.
Any other questions from here or online, or from Jante?
I have a question for Hamja. Has there been any interest or initiative by women starting a shy radical movement for women? Because autism and maybe also Asperger's syndrome, for women, they tend not to be diagnosed with that because it's different. They express it differently. And women are more used to adapting themselves to the norm because they're used to not being the norm and not being taken less seriously. So men might talk more easily in public.
Yeah, there's a collective called Quiet Girl Collective in New York. It's very specifically like an introvert radical group. There's a like I do get where you come from. So Steve Silverman's Neurotribes, which is the greatest book written on neurodiversity, but then it's white men in tech in Silicon Valley get overrepresented. I mean, the people I partner with in my, because I go on constant tour and I have speakers, so there's wonderful people like Catherine May, who's incredible. She's an autistic travel writer who was diagnosed quite late, and she does a podcast called Wintering, which is incredible, which I recommend, which is actually all on women. And there's also people who are totally gender non-conforming. Lydia Brown, who identifies as a they, is the like women, people of color. And I mean, another one, my best friend in the Netherlands is a British artist called Hannah Dawn Henderson, who's British Jamaican, and I love her because she's autistic. I wouldn't change her for a and she doesn't fit the stereotype of someone who's, she's creatively brilliant. She's doing her show at Rijks Academy now, which I recommend everyone see. She's also written a book called Being in a State of Erasure. So yeah, there's wonderful examples, and I totally buy your point. It is true. It's like, but on the other hand, like for example, the band Autistics, it is all white men representing autism, but I don't feel a position that I have so much affection for that band. Also, one of my best friends in the Limburger, a guy called Hurt, who's also diagnosed as autistic. I don't want to go to the autistics and they tell me about the distressing experience of growing up and and be like a obnoxious millennial wokey and tell them he's just a white man. Like I want to listen to his story of distress, and I don't know how to negotiate because I have a lot of love and sympathy and sensitivity towards people from so-called privileged categories. And I guess my book also, there's a chapter, a mocking chapter called Axis of the Resistance for the Sensitive White Man. And I still reflect on Kurt Cobain's suicide 27 years later. When I was in Slovenia, I went to the venue he did his penultimate gig in Ljubljana. I walked around it, and they fit all these categories of privilege. He's a millionaire white male from America, but he still shot himself in the head. And like, so I don't know. I could go on, but that's what I have to say. But read Catherine May. She's a wonderful.
I will. Thanks.
And Pariah Carey in the chat said, I'm a shy radical. With Hamja, there is room for women and non-binary people in the movement.
Thank you. Actually, all the fan base of Shy Radicals is majority female, and I did an event in Brooklyn in Wendy's Subway, and the entire audience was female. Like I'd even invited males, but they didn't bother. They flaked me, didn't show up, and that tends to be the composition. And also the fan base in the Netherlands. Like I have quite a few. So they call themselves fangirls, right? And their majority actually they generally look the same. They're like a woman in her 20s with a fringe who, like, with blue eyes and very tall. And that wasn't what I set out to be. A lot of, in the 1990s, a lot of the alternative rock music I liked were men who identified as effeminate. So this might not mean so much here, but I know Brett Anderson of Suede, even Kurt Cobain, he used to wear a dress and wear eyeliner. And those were the men I identified with. I also identified with people like Robert Smith from The Cure from the 80s. And like, I don't know. And then I watched the film about NWA, Niggas with Attitude, about Eazy and Ice Cube. And in the 1990s, I actually didn't relate to gangster rap, which most of my friends in South London did. But I regret that decision. I wish I related to it more. Am I going off in a tangent? I don't know. I find, I don't know. I still want this sort of ability to, I don't know. I'm still pondering it and I'm thinking out loud. I'm very, and also the characters in Shy Radicals are female characters. Like the main political prisoner is a character called Amy Littlewood, and so I'm putting words in female voices. And I asked Eric Linder, who's a Dutch novelist and poet who's part of the literary program. I asked him. He also has main characters who are female. My favorite character in a contemporary novel is it Miss Miller's Feeling for Snow, which was made into a film by Peter Hoyg, and it's about this woman who's quite secluded and reads mathematics. And also the Manic Street Preachers, which I mentioned in the film, who were very big in Britain and had a bit of a cult following in the Netherlands before they sold out. They were all male band, but then like the album, which I think is the greatest album ever made, the Holy Bible, which the British artist Jeremy Deller made a lot of work about. So they would have these characters in these songs. So they'd have like a Thai female prostitute, and then the male singer would write words for her. They'd have women with eating disorders, and the male singers would write words. I mean, it was a very strange thing. I don't know if Tom, if you sleep. Do you think? Sorry, so Tom mentioned Julian Temple, who's a great. He makes rock biographies. He made a film about the Sex Pistols. I think you working on a film about Shane MacGowan, and you do a lot of rock biopics. I think you made a film with Black Sabbath. You were touring with them. I just wondered about that. Like, do you see that gender thing within like rock stars and like how they're portrayed and in your music videos, or some play with it, or I don't know.
Gosh, I think it's like all of these ideas are changing so quickly at the the moment. It's difficult to fully like making it like an impression of, particularly right now. I think, you know, our ideas around gender in the 90s, and even like the language and wording used to describe the type of artists you're talking about, you know, being feminine or androgynous, you know, is inappropriate language to use now. So it's
Can I ask you about Arlo though? Because Arlo is someone who, so Arlo Parks, who sings the main, who makes a cameo in the film, sings the main song. When we made the film, she was just a very young artist, and now she's like huge. She like, I was in Slovenia, and she was actually on the mainstream radio. She's risen up, but she also occupies. She's not like, I know, like Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses, or she's a very different type of.
I think she's a really inspirational alternative artist that is setting a great impression for young people. It's beautiful to see someone encouraging people to stay hydrated and eat fruit on their social media account, rather than, you know, maybe what we were being exposed to as like adolescents. So yeah, she's incredible, and she's also an advocate for mental health charities and an ambassador for Calm or Mind, I think. And she writes really profoundly about her experiences with anxiety specifically. And I think that's important for young people to find strong role models in that area. So yeah, she's amazing. She's growing every month in popularity as well, Hamja. I think since we worked with her, she's now, you know,
I think like Dua Lipa covers her songs, like
exactly.
But I also think Arlo Parks, who's also, I think she's half Nigerian as well, isn't she? For her father. I think, and the earlier question that Adessa Khan, I would just say to Adessa Khan, listen to Arlo Parks, as someone who sings so beautifully about anxiety, if that's such a thing.
Any final remarks, Hamja?
As wonderful job as Tom did on the film, you know, books are better than the film. So do check the web shop where you can get a signed copy of this book. And if there's anybody watching who'd like to do further screenings, and yeah, this I say, you know, sometimes I don't introduce myself as an artist and curator. I just say I'm Hamza Hassan, Commander-in-Chief of the Global Transnational Revolutionary Movement Against Extraverse Supremacy. I'm on a never-ending world tour until that ideology is finally overthrown. But that is actually my life. Like I haven't had a proper job I have fan people. Some of them happen to be documentary curators or film directors or university, and they just keep me going. And I've been going now for 4 years, and now the film's out. There'll be a further expansion of film tours and stuff. There's a whole generation now of people who've seen the film. The film's been in Australia, Canada, I think it's going to Germany, and they haven't read the book. So I'm just interested in, I think there's a collective associated with Jan van Eyck called Video Power, and the people collective Video Power watched the film and they really liked it, and they wanted to pass it on to this director called Johan Grippenprez, who did a film called Dial H for History. But again, they'd never read the book, and that's going to be a whole new thing.
Thank you so much, Hamja. Thank you so much, Tom Dream. It was a pleasure to have you here. I hope you enjoy your house by the sea.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And for those here and online, make sure you check out next week the second and third events that Hamja will be convening and participating in. On July 2nd, it's Friday at 7, there's a radical roundtable, Art, Islamophobia, and War on Terror. And the day after, Saturday, 3rd of July, Hamja will be convening a second radical roundtable, Neurodiverse Institutions, Neurodivergent Alliances. So see you next week.
Thank you for everyone who stayed around.